Hi everyone, it's Alex, and today I wanted to review Call Me By Your Name. Of course, this time I will be reviewing the film and not the book, which is a video also on my channel. I will mention that I've watched Call Me By Your Name, I think it was at least a week ago, but mainly I wanted to talk about three things, and that's directing, acting, and tone. For anyone that doesn't know, Call Me By Your Name was first a book by Andre Osman that was released in 2007. And content-wise, I would say that the book really does translate very well onto film. And of course, this is all at the credit of director Luca Guadagnino. In the interviews I've been watching with the cast as well as Luca, he does endlessly sort of talk about this kind of idea of what it means to be leading an everyday life and what we can do to really capture those moments on screen. And just by watching the film, not even really these elements of where you would think you're watching a film occur, like maybe dialogue or conflict, I felt like just with the silent relationship or the mannerisms, especially from Elio, played by Timothée Chalamet, was done incredibly well, as well as bouncing really well off of Armie Hammer, who played Oliver. And as someone that used to be highly into photography, I felt very affected by kind of this detached perspective of being a member in the audience sort of just witnessing the relationship going on. And going back to the idea of these conventions of watching a film, or maybe what a director might do to remind you that you're watching a film, I feel like Luca Guadagnino actually sort of throws all of that out the window. I remember so vividly these scenes from the movie where at first I noticed it whenever Elio and Oliver were riding their bikes somewhere, although the camera was very fixed, it was just in one spot. So they begin riding their bikes off away from the scene, and then they disappear. And so slowly we're watching them go away up until they become practically invisible. And the scene feels like it lasts longer than it really should, like as if the cut wasn't done at the right place. To me, I feel this is very intentional just because I feel like setting is so vital to this movie. Taking place in the Italian countryside or in a small town, I feel like with definitely kind of Elio being as our main character, if you will. Specifically with the scene at the piazza whenever Elio and Oliver first arrive there, and then this is when they first sort of describe their feelings for each other, with Elio in between a fountain and Oliver on the other side. For one, that's literally symbolic that there's something in between them while this conversation like this is taking place. Also, we're very much treated just like an onlooker or someone randomly on the street. I can remember so clearly that in this scene in the piazza or the square or whatever, there's a woman just casually walking by in the background that we barely notice. And then also shortly after the train scene near the end of the movie where Elio's calling his mother, there is a woman sitting in the room with him just fanning herself. And with all of this going on, I think it's so incredible because back to that piazza or square scene, Elio is describing his feelings to Oliver in this very metaphorical, kind of secretive way, confessional type thing. Elio is never directly talking to us like what I'm doing to you right now. His back is actually turned from us while he's trying to talk to Oliver, and his voice even becomes very muffled. Usually when it comes to editing films, you would think that this sort of voiceover or with things in the background, it would be either muted or the sound would be fixed to accommodate who's speaking. But Luca Guadagnino intentionally keeps all of this here so it feels much more natural and very intimate in its own way. Of course, everyone jokes about the peach scene in Call Me By Your Name. It's a scene I thought was done very well and definitely not as graphic as it was in the book. But even then in the book, I feel like the peach scene wasn't to be explicit or used in a gimmicky way, and I feel like Luca Guadagnino also appreciates that, and I think he understands that. So moving on to acting. Elio is played by Timothée Chalamet and Oliver is played by Armie Hammer. Timothée Chalamet is also in Lady Bird, another film I love very much, although he doesn't play as big as a role. But Timothée Chalamet, it's very clear that he understands his character to their fullest ability. Especially with Elio, with his body language, specifically with the scene where Oliver and Elio first become intimate at midnight. There's this part where Elio and Oliver, this is also credit to Armie Hammer, but they're both very awkward. Like, it's not this sort of intimate or sensual kind of thing that you would think immediately happens. I honestly think it isn't talked enough about how awkward or uncomfortable sex can be. But most importantly, definitely this sort of hesitance with who does what, when, and how. And it's actually incredible because Timothée Chalamet, he kind of reverts back into what he's already familiar with what to do with Oliver. Specifically, whenever Elio is sort of hanging out with this girl in the film and he's doing certain things where he can kind of switch his mind on to, okay, this is what I have to do sexually. Timothée Chalamet actually recreates those same actions or body language with that girl as he does end up doing with Oliver. It's this incredible push and pull that we know we can observe and that we retain just by watching the film, and it's up to us to sort of pick up on these very human things that we kind of remember anyway in the back of our minds about people in our own lives. And then thinking of Armie Hammer specifically, I really do think Armie Hammer is the one that kind of makes this film in a way. Of course, without Timothée Chalamet, this film, I couldn't imagine it any other way. But whenever Armie Hammer is alone with Timothée Chalamet kind of in this other town before Oliver leaves, it's this great reminder of how the whole story is actually about how nothing is permanent. And again, me thinking about how these places they go to, Elio and Oliver, sort of transform and how they're never the same again. So the scenes or the settings are very much a character in their own right, but it becomes more clear with how we're getting this sort of back and forth or past and present whenever Oliver goes with Elio to this town and they're at night and they're dancing to a very familiar song. And then all of a sudden, Armie Hammer just asks to borrow this girl that he sees just to dance with her. And then Elio's back to being, oh, this is who I was before I even really knew Oliver. Similar to that very first initial dance scene whenever Elio is just watching Armie Hammer do his very awkward dance that he hates to do apparently. So it's clear to me from both Timothée Chalamet and Armie Hammer, they definitely both understand how these characters grew and that they didn't just exist scene by scene. And finally, moving on to tone, I don't have a lot to say as much about this one because I feel like it's a very much combined thing between directing and acting. But of course it would be a crime not to mention the music done by Sufjan Stevens. Specifically at the very last scene as the credits are rolling, whenever Timothée Chalamet is by the fireplace and Visions of Gideon by Sufjan Stevens is playing. For me, that's whenever I really lost it, so to speak. There are a couple things happening here. The first one is that while Elio is sort of grieving in his own way with Oliver's absence, he's facing away from his family to sort of settle into his emotions. And then with the song playing, it's amazing because with Visions of Gideon, but also thinking of Mystery of Love by Sufjan Stevens, it's great how this sort of music personifies as its own character. We can understand that Sufjan Stevens' music, to Elio at least, brought Elio happiness at one point with Mystery of Love, while also equally being able to inflict sadness on Elio with Visions of Gideon. So ultimately it's clear that I need to watch this film again. I feel like there's definitely new things you can learn every time, and I can definitely see why this film is getting so much attention and being nominated for a bunch of awards. But the last thing I wanted to mention is that it's clear that Hollywood is understanding kind of this need for very coming-of-age stories and how, even though coming of age is so timeless, we can really learn so much still from different characters' perspectives. And I love film, and I love movies and books, and anything involving stories because I feel like there's so much potential in all of them. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.